is a well-known name around the world. There are too many facts for him to read out, but let me just tell you. His book, The Rise of the Creative Class, Who's Your City, and a couple of other books. Now the latest one, The Great Reset, which is a very, very interesting look at the global crisis and the ramifications of that. Richard is a well-known academic who's become a very popular writer. He's writing for The Atlantic, The New York Times, The Wall Street Journal, Economist, Harvard Business Review, everything. He is featured on every major news channel. Richard has been appointed to the Business Innovation Factories Research Advisory Council and recently named European Ambassador for Creativity and Innovation. And I hope, Richard, you will give us a good lesson on creativity. Richard's ideas in the creative class, which is very, very innovative. Oops, I hope this will, okay. Richard's, क्यों जी, इसको ठीक कर सकते हैं? हाँ? किसका प्रॉब्लम है? अच्छा ठीक है, okay. So Richard's ideas on the creative class, commercial innovation. Oops. And, okay, what should he do? क्या करना चाहिए? बताएं ना. हाँ? हमारा प्रॉब्लम है, उनका प्रॉब्लम है. अच्छा, okay, let's continue. Okay. So Richard is one of the world's leading public intellectuals. As I said, he's very well known. He has some very innovative ideas, and the thing that attracts me about his ideas is the fact that he's talking about creativity. He's one of the most sought after speakers. He has been named as Esquire magazine's best and brightest, along with Bill Clinton and Jeffrey. To speak to us is because, as you might have seen, we've put forward a new growth strategy at the heart of which is urban development. And I will unabashedly say that we've taken ideas from your work and really focused on trying to utilize the energy of our cities. But for that, we really have to reconfigure our cities. Richard, our cities are exactly the opposite of what you say. They are suburban sprawls. We have no city centers. We have no culture, no creativity in our cities. And that is what we want you to talk about. Challenge us to rethink our notions of urban growth. Currently, we have 90 million kids under the age of 20, many of whom are uneducated and probably not going to get a job. And we've killed our construction industry and our city centers. Do you think that's a good model or not? Our growth rate is 2%, almost the same as our population growth rate. So in a sense, per capita incomes are not growing. So I want to challenge you to educate us. Where are we going to find jobs for these kids? And if we don't, who is safe in this world? I don't think anybody is. Thank you very much, Richard. Look forward to hearing from you. Over to you.
Well, thank you for that kind introduction, Nadeem. And I hope everyone can hear and see me just fine. Please let me know if you can't. And I only wish that we could be with you personally for this wonderful program and magnificent dinner, both celebrating your accomplishments, incredible accomplishments on the new growth strategy, and helping you chart a course for the future of Pakistan. I applaud what you're doing, Nadeem, and the entire team and the conference attendees and participants, and know that what you're doing is important for Pakistan cities and for cities in the emerging and developing world more generally. My hope, and I'm sure it's your hope, is that you can chart a path that others can begin to emulate. First off, I think my ideas on creativity, the creative class, and on cities and urban areas are, if anything, more applicable to the context of Pakistan and developing and emerging economies than they are to advanced economies. And if I may be so bold, I think the main motivating thesis behind all of my work, having come of age when people were talking about trade as a growth strategy, exporting as a growth strategy, foreign direct investment as a growth strategy, innovation and technology as a growth strategy for the advanced, the emerging, and the developing world, I wanted to focus my attention on what might be the most fundamental quality shared by all human beings And if you go back and you read your Marx, Marx, when he was writing about economic development, talked about how workers of the world shared physical labor. And what created a global working class and which created the ability to develop was the shared notion of physical labor. Well, in my research, I think I made a nice intellectual leap. It's not simply technology or trade or foreign direct investment or even innovation that drives economic growth. It's this basic innate human quality that every single of the 6 billion plus people on Earth share, that is evident in every country, in every village, in every community across the world, is the creativity of human beings. And I think we forgot that. And honestly, if you ask me what lies behind the economic and financial crisis that began in the United States and then spread across the world, it was the fact that we tried to build an economy on trading, on financial instruments, on banking, and on speculation, and tried to make wealth or make money or profit the easy way, instead of building a real economy based on human talent, human creativity, and human capability. That's why I call my latest book not The Great Crisis or The Great Crash or The Great Depression or The Great Stagnation. I call it A Great Reset. And what I was able to find, going back and looking at periods of contemporary history, the economic crisis and depression of the 1930s, and the panic of the 1870s, is that what happens of crises, and these are generational events. These are not events that are solved in 5 or 6 or 7 years or over the course of a typical business cycle. These are generational events that take 20 or 25 or 30 years to resolve. But what happens is new economies and new economic systems arise, like the rise of a new economic system based on knowledge and creativity. But our existing social and political and economic institutions are so dependent upon, so hinged to the older economic structures, that speculations and bubbles and financial maneuvers emerge and the economy gets out of whack. So the challenge before us today in Pakistan and across the world is to build new and enduring structures, new institutions, new models, new frameworks, new policies, which are geared to harness the most fundamental, the most essential, the key economic resource we have, the creativity of all of our people. We are living in this world through the greatest economic revolution in human history. This is greater than the shift from that Marx wrote about, from an agricultural society to an industrial society. And if you think about that shift simply from an agricultural to an industrial society, it was quite disruptive. It was quite tumultuous. It caused 2 massive worldwide depressions. It caused many class conflicts, military conflicts, 2 world wars. And it took 50 or 100 years to build a public policy regime called New Deals, which enabled to bring that society's productive capability in line with its ability to create wealth and build a meaningful middle class in the advanced countries. The shift we are going through today is deeper and more elemental, because for the first time in human history, the nature of how wealth is created has changed. In the past, we could derive wealth from the combination of physical resources and raw materials, God-given gifts, if you will, with manual labor of people, create massive factories in urban industrial centers, combine capital, labor, and land, the 3 factors of production, and increase our productivity and our standard of living. But of course, that is no longer a recipe for wealth. The world, in the words of Thomas Friedman, has become somewhat flattened. And so the key to creating wealth and standard of living increasingly lies in harnessing intellectual labor, knowledge-based production, and, as I've argued, human creativity. It's a non-zero-sum resource. It is additive. It builds on itself. And this creative resource becomes the main thrust of economic growth. Now, when some people hear my notion of a creative economy and a creative class, some people believe that it's an elitist notion, that only the most advanced cities, like the Silicon Valley in California, or the great cities of the West, or perhaps emerging cities in China, can have this capability. But that's a misreading. In fact, in my book, I point out that the key to economic success lies not in the 10 or 20 or 30% of us who have the great fortune to be members of the creative class, work in science, technology, innovation, entrepreneurship, research and development, business and management, arts, culture, and entertainment. But the key to success in the next economy, in this 21st century, lies on harnessing the creative capabilities of everyone. I learned this as a young boy by going with my father to the factory where he worked. My dad only had a 7th grade education. He had to drop out of school during the Great Depression to help support his family. He worked in a factory in the urban industrial center of Newark, New Jersey. And when I was a young boy, I used to ask my father to take me to the factory. And when I entered the factory, it was an old industrial building making eyeglasses, just like these. And I would enter the factory, and I've always been fascinated by machines and by technology, and my dad would correct me. He would say, Richard, it's not the machines that make the factory great. It's the knowledge and the intelligence and creativity of the people who work here. Simple people. New immigrants from all over the world to the United States making eyeglasses. Whether it's the transformation of the farm, the transformation of manufacturing, the rise of high quality, high design, more creative manufacturing, and everything from garments to eyeglasses to consumer goods to cars, whether it's the transformation of the service sector, increasingly creativity, not simple quality production, not simple cost reduction, it's the addition of creativity and design, of human knowledge and capability that creates wealth and value. It's quite clear that this period of adjustment, the rise of a creative economy in the context of old institutions, this creative economy has arisen in the context of a very powerful mass production, mass industrial, so-called Fordist economic system, organized around big companies, as Nadeem said, organized around suburban sprawl, organized around an old mode of production. And that's where the adjustment comes in. Those countries, those cities that can realign and reset themselves, that can build new institutions, new public policy regimes, new city structures, new urban forms that enable them to adjust and capture this creativity will get an enormous boost. For nations and for cities, particularly in an environment like my good friend Fareed Zakaria says, of the rise of the rest, what happens during these great adjustment periods, these great resets, is there's an opening for upward and conversely for downward movement. The great economist Mansur Olson, in his book on the rise and decline of nations, argued that these resetting periods often shift the geographic locus of economic power, of economic development, and of technological innovation and growth. The reason, he argued, is because incumbent countries, leader regions get trapped by all